So welcome to our panel on Turkey and the Middle East, failures and successes. The first failure we have to mention is that because of the failure of the Skype connection, one of our announced panelists we will not be able to have on board. We are fortunate to have Ahmad Ghoreishi, who is to my right. He was born in Iran and educated in the United States. He's written extensive papers on U.S.-Iran relations and political and strategic developments in the Middle East. He served as Dean of the Law School, Dean of the School of Political Science and Economics, and Chancellor of the University in Tehran, Iran. He served on the board of directors of several Iranian companies and was an advisor to the Iranian foreign minister and a delegate to the United Nations. And joining us is Dariush, who I don't need to introduce, but who I think we should give a round of applause for organizing this conference. So I'm a political scientist. I'm Harry Kreisler, and I run a program called Conversations with History, which you can all Google on the internet, interviews with well-known policymakers, scientists, and generals, and so on. And I was also executive director of the Institute of International Studies here on the Berkeley campus. So as a political scientist, I have been struck in panel after panel by how well things are going for Turkey and its economic miracle. As a political scientist who studies foreign policy and international relations, I see a different story for the region in terms of what's going on in the geopolitics of the region. So what I thought we would come at this set of problems by asking about some of these political implications. So I'm going to pose a series of questions, and let's see where we go from there. So one thing that is striking in the panels that I listen to is how Turkey really laid the foundation for its economic success, achieving a kind of successful compatibility between religion, the state, and economic development. So what I want to pose this first question is, what is the trajectory of the economy and what is its implications for the region and for Turkey as a role model economically for the rest of the region?
Well, I think, first of all, I started by saying one of the reasons that Turkey has been very successful. Does this work? Do you hear me? One of the reasons that Turkey has been very successful is the fact that Turkey was lucky enough not to have oil. And the lack of resources that is what makes the difference between Turkey and its Arab states, the Arab neighbors, and Iran. And in some other respects, luck has played a big part in Turkey's success. Because when personality, leadership, Ataturk, when he came to power, he wanted to really get divorced from the past. First thing he did, he renounced Ottomanism and did away with the Ottoman Empire. He brought probably the most backward part of the Ottoman Empire and made the Turkey out of it, and the Turkey be the land of the Turks with a little small portion of Europe in it. But Ataturk from the very beginning knew that Islam would be an impediment to economic progress, and he was obsessed with westernizing the Middle East. At that time, even at the beginning of the 20th century, believe it or not, while Islam was very strong in the Middle East, there was a trend towards modernization and trying to modernize, copy the West. And this is what Ataturk more succeeded doing. Another factor that Ataturk did, and it's very curious to think about it, he really wanted not to have military interfere in politics. He came in with the idea that he was a general, but he took off his uniform, never put his uniform on all the time that he was president of Turkey. That was a civilian job. And he told all his other generals, if you want to go into politics, leave the military. Ismet İnönü left. Marshal Çakmak, he want to stay, and he stayed as chief of staff all throughout, and a very religious man, by the way, too. Ataturk had no use for religion. Ismet İnönü was a religious man, but secular people. And they stayed in power, and they went through the period of reform when he became through his 6 principles, and one of them, which is very important, 2 concerning today. One was secularism, the other one was what he called etatism, statism, that the state should play an important role in the economic development of the country. This is one of the main arrows of his 6 arrows, so to speak. One was that the state would be the main player. And the reason for that was very obvious. Turkey was so backward and so poor, there was no capital. There was no private capital to come in. Whatever money had to come in, had to come through the state. So he did that. Now, once Ataturk disappeared from the picture, and once again Turkey was very successful, very lucky in having a man like Ismet İnönü. Ismet İnönü was a very wise statesman, so often underestimated, but he was a very good soldier and a very good statesman. And he ran Turkey, a masterful diplomat. Throughout the war, he managed to get Turkey out of the war by playing neutral, playing one side against the other. As the Germans were winning, he was siding with the German. When the German was losing, he was siding with the Europe. And finally, at the last minute, when the Russians were almost at the gate of Berlin, he said, okay, I declare war on Germany now. Just enough time to get himself into the United Nations. And then, when the election came, and this is the first election that took place, and this is the eye-opener, when the first election took place in Turkey, free elections, and everybody thought the Islamists were out, and Islam was not a factor anymore. Turkey was a secular state. Bingo, who comes in? Adnan Menderes, the head of the Democratic Party. And one of the things he did was revitalize the religious element. People still talk about Menderes as though he was a knight on his white horse coming back at night and reading the Quran. And he allowed the recitation of Quran again, building of the mosque. And the military, and this is where İnönü came in here, the military was ready to pull a coup right there. Ismet İnönü said, no, we have a separation of power. He did that. We have a separation of military and civilian rule. He did not allow the military to intervene. He went on, İnönü, till he almost became a dictator anyhow. In 1960, the military, we had the so-called colonel coup. The colonels pull a coup, not the generals, but the colonels pull a coup in 1960 and overthrew him. And of course, hanged him, hanged the president, General Bayer, and that was the dark part of it. But what the military did here was they took upon themselves that being the guardian of the principles of Kemalist revolution, which Kemal himself never gave that job to the military. But the military now, after the overthrow of Menderes, took this job on themselves, saying that we're going to be the guardian of the revolution. And to be sure enough, every 10 years they pull a coup. 1960 they pull a coup, 1970 they pull a coup, 1980 they pull a coup. Then we begin to have these mini coups where they would more or less ask the prime minister to resign, force him to resign, till the military and the secular groups, the liberal group, so to speak, the progressive group, they all got together and said the way we can get rid of Islamist movement in Turkey and save secularism was joining Europe. And they want to join the common market and join the EU. And one of the conditions EU put in, and several conditions that they put in, was that Turkey should democratize more fully, no military coup, the Kurdish situation should improve, and they put a whole lot of conditions. And the Turks, in their haste to join EU, did all these things. And as a result, the main beneficiary of that were the Kurds and the Islamists. Because as a result of being no military threat of coup and no then allowing the military not to intervene and free elections, they managed to organize well. Erdogan, who was then becoming the mayor of Istanbul, I don't know whether he had ever studied the tactic of Tammany Hall in New York at the turn of the century or not, but he followed that line of work. They had charity organization, people from the interior Anatolia coming to Istanbul. They would give handout, put them up, find job for them, make a living for them, and as a result get their vote. A very successful operation. And then he had to
So, Darius, is this a model? Is the economic success so determined by Turkish history, which we've just heard described, that it's not an economic or a political model for the rest of the Middle East?
No. Thank you for your question, Harry. First of all, I must begin by stating that I'm not an expert on Turkey.
Not that I'm on.
Experts are sitting over there. I think they should come up and join us.
We'll call them.
But Turkey is definitely a unique country in the Middle East for a number of reasons. As Professor Ghoreishi stated earlier, I think the political trajectory diverged from the general pattern that came to dominate the area in the aftermath of the Second World War. So prior to the Second World War, Turkey had a one-party system of government, initially dominated by Atatürk, and after Atatürk passed away from the scene, then his successor İnönü became the president, and he dominated the Turkish political scene. But in 1950, İnönü allowed for multi-party elections. And so Turkey became a democracy, which went against the general pattern of what prevailed in the Middle East, then as now. So it became a democracy, although it was a flawed democracy, and as the professor mentioned, it subsequently became a military democracy, with the military taking upon itself the task of being the guardian of Atatürk's so-called revolution from above. But economically, I think Turkey resembled the rest of the countries in the Middle East in the sense that you had state domination of the economy, a very large and bloated and inept, incompetent bureaucracy, small, minuscule private sector, anemic rates of economic growth, closed economy, autarky became the order of the day, and Turkey practiced ISI, or import substituting industrialization, and its industries were really not competitive globally. But I think the major economic break came in the aftermath of the 1980 coup, when Turgut Özal was placed in charge of reforming the economy, and he initiated the process of opening up the economic system. The political system was already relatively pluralistic and democratic and open, certainly flawed, but compared to the neighbors, it was an open political system. But Özal opened the economic system, right, as my friend was explaining to me earlier, and this proved to be beneficial for Turkey. It was a difficult process, and it was Özal who tried to implement the system of export-led growth. And initially, of course, there were difficulties, but with the passage of time, Turkish industry became more competitive. And to my limited understanding, it became particularly competitive after 1996, when Turkey signed a trade agreement with the EU, and the Turkish industries were forced to compete with the European industries. And so I think the foundations for economic takeoff were laid by Turgut Özal. And the foundations for political development, some may argue, were laid by Atatürk. Atatürk always paid lip service to the concept of democracy, but when it came to practicing democracy, he was hesitant. And he believed in the principle of tutelage. He believed that Turkey wasn't ready for democracy. And so throughout the time that he was ruling Turkey, he was a dictator. But he believed that eventually, when the time is ripe, then the lid of political oppression should be lifted and the Turkish people should be allowed to participate in the political process. And this happened in 1950. So Turkey developed an open political system in 1950, and then it developed a more or less open economic system in 1980.
So what both of you seem to be saying is that what was the result of historical personalities, of luck, and of history all coming together over time created a situation where democracy, economy, and religion were on separate trajectories. Is that a layman's summary of what you just said? And if it is, it's very peculiar, and it may not be a model that other countries in the region can follow or could follow.
Another fact about Turkey, remember, location, location, location. The location, Turkey is the place where Turkey is of vital interest to everybody. During the Cold War, the United States put Turkey in NATO, and I mean, NATO being a North Atlantic Treaty Organization consisting of European Christian community. What is Turkey doing in Eastern Mediterranean? I have no connection with North Atlantic, and not being a non-Christian. What were they doing there? It was because of the location of Turkey. The famous remark Acheson made about Turkey when Turkey was going to be admitted to NATO, and in the Senate hearing, Senator George, I think, was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, asked Acheson, say, why do we have to have Turkey in NATO? He said, well, because of the location and the area. So how much area does Turkey cover? He said, Acheson said, well, Mr. Chairman, Turkey doesn't cover much territory, but it's like a bikini swimming suit. The area that does cover are absolutely vital. And this is exactly what it was. The Turkey geographically connects the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, connects Europe to Asia, and now, of course, it has become even more sexier with the breakup of the Soviet Empire, and with all the other Turkic states on the side. The location is very important. That location has helped Turkey in being the main player in the game.
So were you going to add something, Dariush?
Go ahead.
No. Well, what I was going to ask then. So we've reached this this pinnacle of economic success, which we've been listening to discussions of the various aspects this morning. So the question is, at this point in time, just looking at the domestic situation, how is the domestic politics evolving now in Turkey? Because one of the comments I heard in an earlier panel was the disturbances in the park was kind of a blip, and that it will pass. But from what I read in the Financial Times and in the Independent, it seems to be also a conflict about values, secular values of young people, about open space and being able to live the lifestyle they want, and the whole question of the use of alcohol on the one hand, and a regime that has an authoritarian face and an Islamic base that is not reacting initially in the most positive way. So what I'm asking is the politics domestically going to change at all with negative consequences for the economy, or will they remain separate?
Well, these are excellent questions, Harry, but let me just try to answer the question that you posed earlier, and then we come back. Maybe Professor Ghoreishi will come back to the question. So you said whether the Turkish model is applicable to other countries in the region. I think it is definitely applicable to the other countries in the region, especially the opening up of the economic system and the embrace of the market system and the macroeconomic stabilization that took place, not necessarily in the 1980s or in the 1990s, but with the rise of the AK party beginning in 2002. So it is true that the lure of the EU at that time played an indispensable role in assisting Erdogan to initiate all of these reforms and to have them enacted into law. So, and the lure of the EU also prompted some of the more moderate and cognizant and open-minded members of the military to not intervene or to restrain their more radical forces and allow the AK party to implement these reforms. But there's nothing magical about these reforms. And if Turkey was able to do it, then other countries in the region, including my own country, should be able to do so as well.
Just one thing, going back to what I said, Turkey was lucky in not having oil. The other states in the Middle East that have oil, the state is so powerful and so much money at disposal that it's very hard for private enterprise to come in and you know, to compete with the state. Everything happens around the state because they have the money. Turkey didn't have that. Turkey didn't have that oil to put up with, and then that helped Turkey. So whether I agree with you on one thing, it may be Iran with its oil resources declining, maybe they would have a more thing to follow with Turkey or Egypt. But take a country like Saudi Arabia, like the Gulf states. I don't think the Turkish model is going to work there at all, because the state is so powerful. The state is the source of money, source of everything. The state is a totalitarian state in every sense.
Yes. Well, in Iran, I think the potential for diversifying the economy is great. And Iran has the human capital and the expertise to do it, and it could do so by drawing upon the experiences of Turkey. Iran also has the additional advantage of having 3 million Iranian expatriates scattered throughout the world with access to ample amounts of capital and resources, but even more importantly, skills. So if the country manages to reverse the brain drain and the flight of capital, I think it stands a chance of diversifying its economy and moving away from dependence on oil. And as Dr. Ghoreishi pointed out, already, in part because of the sanctions, it has been forced to move away from oil. So I agree entirely that rentier economies will find it exceedingly difficult to diversify, but not impossible. I think it is possible to overcome rentierism, and it has happened in the past, unfortunately not frequently enough, but an attempt should be made to do so in the region.
So let's move on to domestic politics. Is Turkey changing, given recent incidents and actions by the regime, and what will the implications of that be for the Turkish model?
You mean Iran is changing?
No. We're now going back to Turkey.
Oh.
The domestic politics within
Turkey.
Within Turkey, the apparent rebellion of some of the secular youth, the assertion of Islamic values by the Prime Minister, the transition from one Prime Minister to another.
So Turkey, of course, is a polarized society, and I think what we are witnessing in Turkey, as was pointed out by Alan earlier, could also be construed as growing pains, right? So they have had an exceedingly successful 10 years in which they've tripled their GDP per capita, and they have increased the number of people belonging to the middle class. And since demographically it's a very youthful country, the level of education and the level of literacy have gone up substantially. And amongst a certain sector of the electorate, I think there is disappointment and disagreement with certain tendencies of the Prime Minister. And they believe that he has perhaps ulterior motives of transforming Turkey into more of an Islamic republic, and undermining the secular constitution, and they are inimically disposed towards some of his more authoritarian policies. So they exercise their right to criticize the government, which is not a bad thing. I think had this happened in another country, actually it did happen 4 years ago in the aftermath of the disputed elections in Iran. Large number of Iranians poured into the streets and they demonstrated against the government, but the manner in which the government crushed the rebellion in Iran was quite different from the manner in which the Turkish government did it. So it's a polarized society, and the people would be granted the opportunity to express themselves in the upcoming elections. But I think the AK party still has a very broad base of support, particularly in the interior of Anatolia. And I don't know, obviously I haven't taken a poll, nor have I been following polls, but I think that still the majority of the people would be solidly behind this party and their prime minister.
But there is such a thing as a majority dictatorship too. Turkey is, while it is a majority rule, but it's becoming more illiberal state, and then that's what worries many secularists in Turkey, and then their number is what the former ruling elite, the westernized people in the western part of Turkey, who look down their noses at the people in the interior, in Anatolia. But now the people in Anatolia, the tigers, so-called, of Anatolia, are coming up, and then the economy is improving, and the water resources that was built up there, and so forth. They're much better off economically. But this worries, this business of this secularism worries. Another factor that we should not be writing off, but I think still we have to bear in mind that the military at the moment is subdued and put in cage. How long will it stay in cage? We don't know. Given the fact that if Erdogan really goes a couple of steps further and does alienate the secular to a large extent, there is a possibility that the military may make a comeback. Or if international community, if this crisis happens someplace, in Cyprus or someplace, I don't know. Or if there is a serious Turkish uprising where the military has to intervene. These, or all these places, one cannot completely rule out in the next 10, 15 years. I won't be around, but so I can say anything wrong about you people will be around. But by then, don't rule out the role of the military. Once more, the military come back.
I think the military has been effectively emasculated
for the moment. For the moment.
Time being.
For the moment.
Yes.
So look, 2 years ago, Turkey looked like an actor on the international scene that could be a dominant geopolitical force in the region. 2 years later, that appears to have unwound for many reasons, including the Syria crisis, the conflict of Sunni versus Shia that is now dominating the region as a result of the Syria crisis, the whole reassertion of an identity as importantly Shia or Sunni. There was a piece by Patrick Cockburn in The Independent the other day about the whole problem of Shia fleeing from Syria and unsettling the community within Turkey, the Shia community that had been fairly stable in the past. So the question is, what is going to be the impact of the Syria crisis, the Shia-Sunni conflict, which Turkey is just being drawn into as a matter of location?
The Shia-Sunni conflict is not that much of a problem in Turkey. That they have the Alawites, which are a branch of Shiite, which even the Shiites don't consider them as Shiites. But the Alawites, apart from that, Turkey doesn't have a Shia.
But what about the border problem?
Yeah, the border problem, that's something else. You have the border in Syria, and you have the serious problem in Iraq, as it was pointed out, with the Kurds. So far, the Turks, the Kurds in Iraq are cooperating very well with Turkey, and there are other business going on. But how long that will last, we don't know. If they're very successful, if the Turks in Turkey want to join the Kurds in Iraq, you're going to have a major problem.
So the main issue, of course, is that Erdogan has taken sides in the Syrian conflict, and he also took sides in the Egypt.
Both sides, he chose the losers.
So bad diplomatic choices.
So he in Egypt he definitely chose the loser, and Syria remains to be seen. I think the Syrian conflict is going to be a long, prolonged process, unfortunately.
So what is one of the things that I heard in earlier panels was Turkey's dependency for, I think it was gas from Iran.
Gas and oil. Oil, gas, and other inputs.
And
energy.
And it's dependent, it seems to be dependent on capital from outside and may be impacted by the decision of the new Fed chairman and the Fed here in terms of tapering down. So the question is, will it be able to deal with these geopolitical dependencies, the resource dependencies, and their dependency on the international economy?
The best example in support of Iran, when Erdogan blasted the United States in Egypt, said that they're not doing enough to restore democracy in Egypt, he kept very quiet about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the one that's supporting the military in Egypt all the time. He didn't say one word against Saudi Arabia. But boy, he did blast the United States. That shows how much dependent he is.
Saudi Arabia was not supporting Morsi.
No, Egypt, the military. Saudi Arabia was supporting the military.
Oh, the military, yes.
And Erdogan is against the military in Egypt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he did that, but he did not say one word against Saudi Arabia.
That's right.
So,
the level of savings, as was pointed out earlier in the day, Turkey has a youthful population, and they're not saving sufficiently, and consequently they are dependent upon foreign capital entering the country so that they would be able to maintain their level of economic expansion and economic growth, definitely. So that could potentially be an Achilles heel of the Turkish economy. And most of the money coming in is short term, so it could leave potentially.
so what was we're getting a time signal, or?
Yes.
Yes, I think we're out of time.
Okay, we're out of time, and so thank you all for your patience in listening to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.